Hello and welcome to Juicy Crimes. I'm very excited to talk to our guest, Giovanni Rocco, former FBI undercover informant who took down major mob families, one being the one that was the inspiration for The Sopranos. And I know you've written a book, Giovanni's Ring. You have a podcast, Inside the Life. Welcome to Juicy Crimes.
Thank you, Heather. Thanks for having me.
I mean, I'm very excited. I have so many questions. I've always loved seeing movies where there's an undercover cop, an FBI detective, and I've always wondered how does that even begin? Like, so you joined the force, and then they say we're gonna create this whole other life for you, so that people actually think that you're one of them. Like, tell me how that began.
Yeah, I mean, sometimes it is that simple, right? For me, I'm third generation police, so my undercover escapade started at a young age. My dad was a detective in the city I grew up in an area in Hudson County, and he used to send me up the street to get license plates from bikers and guys that had shops, like, that were stealing cars and flipping them and changing the VINs. So he would send me up on my bicycle with my friends and my brother. I'd write down a license plate and bring it back to him. So I started at a young age. So I had the thrill for it, right? Starsky and Hutch was big when I was a kid growing up. And, so Hill Street Blues, it's, a lot of the kids today wouldn't know what that is, but it's an old police like NYPD. What Blue Bloods is today was Hill Street Blues when I was growing up. So they had some undercover roles in those types of shows, and it was always the draw, the sexiness of it, right? Because it was the crazy guy or girl that stood out from all the others. So that was the draw that I had to it. And growing up in the street, I mean, I understood the street. I had a good understanding before became a police officer. So when I did become a police officer in a city, I was a uniform cop, and then I quickly rose to the rank of detective and went into narcotics, and that's when I started doing undercover work.
Now, like in the mob world, like the famous movies, when Diane Keaton reveals in Godfather 2, like, I don't want to have another child with you because I don't want them to be sucked into this mob world. With your third generation police work, was there anyone in your family that was like, maybe I don't want my son doing this dangerous job?
That's a great question, Heather. I don't think anybody's ever asked me that. I guess my dad he wanted me to be a police officer. We're a proud police family. I was the black sheep of my family. I was the kid always being put in detention in school, being suspended. I think I had my first detention in kindergarten, my first suspension in first grade. That's the kind of kid I was. I'm not proud of it, but
But what were you doing at 5 and 6 to get in trouble? I'm just
picking
curious.
fights, picking fights,
Oh,
standing out, wanting to be the standout kid, the class clown. I wasn't a bully. I was just trying to be in the thick of it. And that kind of spilled over into my law enforcement career. So my dad, being a police family, it wasn't expected of it, but they were proud of me when I became one, when my brother became one, my uncles. So it wasn't expected of us, but I think my mother and father, there was a breath of fresh air because I was on my way to prison, dead or in jail by 25. Not proud of that, but yeah, I was a bad kid. I was hanging with the wrong bunch. I barely made it out of high school. I write about it in my book to inspire others who might be in those shoes, who might think less of themselves at the time, to think there is more to life. There are other things. All you have to do is set your sights on something. You could have any goal you want. It's up to you and to achieve it. That's the way I went into it. My dad did, however, tell me when I became a police officer, when they offered me a gold shield, I was hungry for narcotics. I was
so
hungry for the street.
Gold shield means we
It was
want you to go
the
undercover.
detective, just to be a
Oh,
detective.
detective. Okay. Uh-huh.
So you brought out of patrol from a patrolman in a police car, maybe walking the beat, working in a sector, to having a gold shield and having a detective shield. So I wanted to be a narcotics cop. And my dad said, listen, you're worth more than that. Don't be a narcotics cop. He kind of looked down on narcs, as they call them. He said, look, be a detective, be a suit, be a homicide, a special case, an investigator, be a guy. But I also had exposure to that along the way. So when there was a homicide or because the area I worked in, Hudson County, cartels were really big. That Scarface era, the Colombian cartels and Mexican cartels were heavily influenced. There was murders and, brutal slaughters of families and home invasions every single week. So you were catching homicides on top of working narcotics. So I had dipped my toes in narcotics and I got the sexiness for it and the taste for it, of the adrenaline, the thrill of the hunt, the chase. But then I also had the both sides where I was an investigator. I was able to put my brain to work trying to, solve crimes, burglaries, thefts, auto thefts, big auto theft rings back in the day in the Newark area. So, we had a bunch of different crimes. So if you named it, I worked it. But I was always drawn to narcotics because I was given that opportunity to work undercover.
So how do the hours work when you're undercover? Like that's what I
Oh,
always wondered. Like how does it work? How does that work with your what you're getting paid and then you're like living this whole other life? And does your personal girlfriend or whatever know about it or don't know about it?
yeah, I think, early in my career when I was working local police, the say you told everybody, right? When you worked a juicy undercover job, you told everybody about it. You bragged about it. You were given awards. You were given in public. Memorial Day came and they handed out awards, and you were given a ribbon to put on your uniform because you did some special thing, and they would highlight it and tell everybody what a great job you did. As I advanced in my career and I went from local to state to federal, federal is more we hide in the shadows, right? I would tell my significant others along the way. They knew what I did. Of course, my spouse would know what I did. My kids, not so much. My kids, I left in the dark because they were too young to understand. I always explained to them. Dare was big back then, so I'd say, when you start going to Dare class, we'll have a conversation on what Dad does. So I never really told them too much. Some people, when I met them, they maybe played on both sides of the fence, and I thought maybe they would out me and expose my cover, so I didn't tell people too much after I got to the federal level. Because again, you're going from doing corner corner roll-ups, which are like nickel and dime bags of cocaine, heroin, marijuana, quick hits, right? Roll-ups. They're just as dangerous though, because back in the day when Gatorade bottles were made of glass, I often had one smashed on my head for buying from the wrong dealer because I went to four corners of an intersection. I went to the northwest corner and bought my dope, and then I would go to leave, and a kid from the southwest corner, he wanted me to sell, buy his dope. So you had to get out quick because this world of treachery that it was, you can be robbed as soon as you made your way around the corner. They're looking to rob you and steal that dope, or get revenge for you spending money on another corner. So it was really treacherous. So you had to be real careful. So yeah, so as I advanced into the DEA, from the local and state level, I was a little more hidden about what I did.
And so then so get to like when you did have to like, so did you pretend to be part of this mafioso crime family?
Yeah, later on in my career, when I became a full-time undercover, which are there are not many full-time people like I did later in my career. When I tell you, there's maybe a handful of us within the FBI. Then I was trained to be an FBI undercover. When I received that training, you went to specialized training. You received very intense training, human behavior, human interaction, really, emotional intelligence, just different levels of communication, body language, how to read people in a room, how to control the environment you're in. That's a game changer. But it's pure exhaustion because when you're in a room with killers, you never knew what was going to pop off when it was going to pop off. So at that level, we were on all the time. I very rarely went to the FBI division that I worked in. I was in the New Jersey division. I very rarely went to the field office. I would go to a warehouse. I'd be real careful on how my speech changed. Cops referred to each other as brother. I never referred to each somebody as my brother or in the street. I would call an officer if I got pulled over for speeding. I would call him, boss. Hey, boss, because that's when an inmate calls a CO, a corrections officer. That's when an ex-con would call a policeman. I referred to cops.
And you're pretending to be
You
this
did,
whole.
you did.
So, I mean, this is like, it's funny that you said you were the class clown because, obviously you're acting as an undercover agent. You are acting, you have a backstory. I mean, you're basically doing everything that you would like learn in theater school, except like, so how did you create like what your backstory was so that they would never suspect you?
Well, yeah, that's a whole nother level. At the end of my career, I had five different identities, five different social security numbers, five different dates of birth, credit history. So depending on what case I was working, I would develop my legend. We call it a legend. So my legend was whoever I decided to be that day. It was Giovanni Rocco. It was Giovanni Gatto. I think one of my identities was John Franco, and they were all chosen by me for reasons, I had a reason to pick those names. That's how deep it is. You just don't go, today I want to be John Smith, because if your name is Michael and you walk into a room and they're calling John, hey, John, they're waiting for you to turn around. And you're not turning around because your name is Michael in your true life. You have to really give it that much thought. So you have to be real careful. You have to know how to spell your last name. You have to remember your social security number. Just going without even being live. We call it going live when you meet a bad person, when you meet a criminal. But even when you're traveling and you go through TSA and maybe somebody stops and asks you your date of birth or asks you to spell your last name, you have to be on all the time. You have to be ready. So it's very, very mentally draining. And the legend, you have to remember where you come from. So if I ask you, Heather, where you lived when you were 12 years old, you can tell me instantly. Well, I had five different identities. So depending on who I was, if somebody asked me, where'd you live when you were 12 years old? I better be ready to answer that. And especially in this day and age where they can look you up in computers and Google
Yeah,
and
I was gonna say, I wonder if doing this is like so much harder now that like, you know, um, well, we can see that, like if it was like a 35-year-old going to do this now, they have an internet history from when they were 16 at the prom, da 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 da, and someone would, if they were suspicious, be like, your dad was a cop.
yeah,
Why are you now acting like you're, a gangster?
sure, it's
So,
very hard. Yeah,
so
it's
do
very
you
hard
know
because
how they do deal with it now, or?
yeah, I mean, we always advance, right? Like we're always one step ahead. We have to be. The government's always one step ahead. We're trying to stay ahead of things. We don't give up tradecraft, but biometrics is very hard. It was hard when I was still operational. Going in and out of different countries, they would capture your biometrics, your facial recognition when you were in their airport. Even though the US didn't do it, there were other countries that were capturing your identity. So you had to be real careful. Because if I went through as Giovanni Gatto and then I traveled to that same region in Europe or wherever it was that had facial recognition, well, guess what? They could red flag me and then they pull me to the side and then they can interrogate you and ask you. They do what's called secondary. You get pulled into another room. So you have to be real careful. But technology changes. When I started working undercover, they gave us what was the size of like a little notepad or a VCR tape. You stuck that in your pants and that was your recording device. Today, listen, you could put the recorder on the head of a pin. It's so small nowadays. You know, you would never find it.
So, okay, so let's get into like how do you infiltrate and become friends with these guys and gain their trust?
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of so you're asking as an undercover or a covert operative, you're asking to immerse yourself in a world where it's utter treachery, murderers, mayhem, people who are not above board. You're not walking into if you're doing criminal work, if you're doing cartel work, murder for hires, you're going in knowing that there's people who are looking to steal from you, rob you, maybe set you up, and the deal might not even happen. So before you go in, ingratiation is everything, right? Just like when you go to a Christmas party, right? And you go and your spouse takes you or a significant other takes you to a party, you're walking into a room full of strangers. Well, how do you do it? You ingratiate yourself. It is that easy. But with the gangsters, you don't want to come on like a gangster. You don't want to come on like a murder and mayhem type of person. You want to come in easy and you want to just like, it's human behavior one on one. I'm not going to show up at my wife's Christmas party for her company and be this loud, boisterous gangster guy. I'm going to be me. I'm going to be smooth. I'm going to be wait to introduce. So it's kind of the same thing. But then when they find out you're worth something, then they get your claws into you. See, in the underworld, greed is everything. Money rules all in the underworld. Money rules everything. Greed is the force that drives the treachery. So you have to be careful. So again, it's everything we're trained for. The human intelligence and the interaction, the conversations. You have to remember every conversation you had with somebody and what you said because a number or a suggestion you make, you agree on a price, that's the price. You can't go back and change it. That'll get you killed. So you're always on pins and needles, Heather. Always. Imagine always being so stressed out that you're waiting for the other shoe to drop. You're waiting to find out, is today the day they're going to think I'm a cop? Is today the day they think I'm a federal agent? Is somebody, do I walk in this room? And I have, if you read my book, in chapter one, I touch on that. I went to a meeting with the Gambino crime family. And as I'm standing there in an auto body shop, they reference a guy named Kyle. And I was there when Kyle was arrested as an FBI agent. We processed him in the FBI field office. And I sat there, took a big, big good old swallow, controlled my breathing, and here comes Kyle walking through the door, and they introduced me, and I just said a prayer to God that he wouldn't recognize me because there's no way I was getting out of there at that time. And you just hope for the best. You think to yourself,
And what
oh,
he didn't recognize you.
he didn't, because he was walking into a room and he was a capable guy. He was a shooter. He did a lot of time for violent crimes, and thank God, but by the grace of God, he was introduced to me, and the way I was introduced that I was a capable guy. I was at his level or above. He was very intimidated by the other guys in the room, so he kind of stayed in his place. It's almost like taking your dog to the dog park. I hate to make that kind of a reference, but when you walk in, you take your dog and you go into a yard with a bunch of other dogs, and there's the sniff test, right? And that determines how everybody's going to get along. Some days it's good, some days it's bad.
So I'm so curious, like with the whole, and it's been such a fascinating genre of film, the Italian American, the mafiosa, in that they were lived, this normal looking family, they like the nicer things in life. They're very hospitable. Like you want to be invited to their seven fishes party and all that. I'm not Italian, I'm Irish, but like I've always been very fascinated by it. And and then being Catholic, like that they were Catholic and you have to be baptized. And I'm like, but they're murdering people. Like, how do they justify what they do and then still walk around and be so charming?
Well, that's the treachery that they live, right? That's the life that they chose. They often remind you, the gangsters themselves, criminals, they'll remind you silently sometimes, but sometimes when they're in front of their family, you look at them and you say, wow, what a good dad he is. I've seen it. I've been in their house breaking bread with them. I've been with Irish gangsters. All
Yeah.
gangsters are similar, right? Irish gangsters, Italian gangsters, it's all the same culturally. Um, the cultures are different, but yet they're so similar. So again, some of my names are Irish if I went in as an Irish guy. You see these loving fathers, you see these loving families, but then when the door is closed and you have a quiet meeting inside and then the family's in the other room, you see this darkness fall over them, or their eyes change and they literally turn into another person when their family isn't around. And it's just some guys, it's just business. Other gangsters are just really good guys that are tied up in this world of treachery, and they're not murderers. Not everybody is a murderer. Okay. Not everybody is what you see in The Godfather. It's not all the time killing and murder and burying bodies. That's not what it is. Later in my career, during the DeCavalcante case, yes, I had a lot of that because it was murder and mayhem. But a lot of gangsters are just guys that I could have been a gangster, Heather. If I didn't graduate high school and I didn't go the way I did and become a police officer, chances are I could have easily wound up in the underworld as a criminal. But I chose not to. So these guys, they chose to take the easy route. They choose not to pay their taxes. Other guys just, the guys that I was in the mafia with, the bosses, they really quickly would lull me to sleep sometimes because I saw what a good person they were. And then 2 seconds later, they would just morph into this gangster persona and just be like, "So when are you going to kill this guy?" Because I was given a task to kill two guys, and then ultimately just one. But they were asking me, okay, and you could see them seething and enjoying the moment, and how I would make them describe, how do you want him to die? And they would go into detail. I want him to die violently. Matter of fact, I don't even want you to kill him right away. I want him to suffer. I'll put him in a wheelchair, throw acid in his face and blind him. I want him to suffer so bad. And they would show you these moments and you go, okay, thank you for reminding me what an animal you are, what a gangster and a horrible, sometimes a horrible human being some of these guys are. And this is what drives you to continue the case. They often will remind you.
So, and why were, in The Sopranos, it was always that someone had to go because, they weren't loyal or they were like double dipping or maybe they were becoming an informant. Like, what is it in the family why they would have to kill someone that's worked for them for 20, 30 years?
It depends on the sociopath you're dealing with. I dealt with a guy, not in this case, excuse me, in another case, he was sitting having dinner with his crew. The guy down the end of the table kept sneezing. And it bothered him so much. He goes, "What's with the sneezing? Why is this guy down the other end?" And he knew him. And they were all with him and his crew. And he goes, "What? He keeps sneezing." He goes, "I don't know, boss. I guess he got allergies, or I don't know if he has a cold or something." He said earlier he had allergies. It annoyed the boss of the family so much. He goes, "I can't have that. Look at this guy down there. He's sneezing all night, wiping his nose. It's disgraceful." By that night, they walked him out the back and they killed him. Now, that's
Wait, is
very
it?
extreme.
Wait, was that the what was it called? The Diavanti? What's the?
No, that wasn't a decav. That was not the
Oh,
DeCavalcante crime family. That was a different crime family years ago in
wow.
another investigation,
But
and they
that
killed
sounds
him.
very Tony Soprano. Like that's
Very Tony
really,
Sopranos. Yeah.
yeah.
And there's, and again, you mentioned The Sopranos. That's why my book is called, My Life Inside the Real Sopranos. That case particularly, I watched The Sopranos, but yet I investigated the DeCavalcantes for 15, 20 years as an investigator. I worked organized crime. I worked Vice. I would go and cover the funerals of May guys and just do investigations. But I would sit there and I would look at all the players and I would look at the members of the Cavalcantes, the Gambinos, the Genovese, the other five families and take pictures of them. Now I'm on the inside. Now when I was introduced to somebody, it was like, "Oh, I know this guy. I took pictures of him 15 years ago. Oh, wow, I know this guy. He's a boss of the family now. So it was very Soprano-esque. The pork store, if you watch The Sopranos, if you know anything about it, the neighborhood, the New Jersey faction versus the New York faction. I had the case that I worked, we gleaned a lot of intelligence and we showed how the families work together very closely together. So it was very Soprano-esque, which was harder because, again, I write about in a book where James Gandolfini passed away while I was infiltrating his family. And the HBO series was being played over and over and over in homage and as a memorial to him in remembrance of Gandolfini. And here I was trying to decompress in my undercover apartments. And every time you turned the TV on, it seemed the news was covering it or the HBO was playing another episode. So it was like, it never turned off on me. It was so draining. So,
And when like what I always find what I love about the movies is like, it's sexy. Like the macho of the Italian gangster, the protectiveness of the girlfriend is sexy, who then becomes the wife. Even though they're cheating and they're killing people, like I see why women like that, like protectiveness. Do the women always do they do they always know that their husband or boyfriend is doing that? Or do they sometimes really think they have a regular job in sanitation and work together in like car sales? Like, what do
yeah,
they?
sometimes, yeah, it's both, right? You hit them both on the head. It's a double-edged sword. Some I have witnessed that, and again, some of the wives I was around, they were more gangster than their husbands. It was harder for me to infiltrate the spouse or the paramour or the girlfriend or the wife than it was to infiltrate the gangster. I would meet a gangster, and because I was a foreigner, wasn't from the family, I didn't grow up in the neighborhood. The women would be like, "I don't like that Giovanni. I don't know who he is. He's a nice kid. I like the way he looks, but I just something about him. I don't like him." And their spidey senses were so on. But I had to win them over more than I had to win the mobsters over. They were more work than the husbands. Other times, the wives and the spouses, girlfriends, they had no idea. They thought that he got up, like you said, he had a 9 to 5, had a union job, went and worked, did this, did that. And they thought, yeah, he just goes out and he gambles, he does some things on the side, but he provides a good life for me. She has no idea. She had no idea whatsoever. So much so, I was taking a meeting probably 3 times a week with a member of another crime family, and we would sit in his car. And I'm in a Best Buy. We had lunch and we're parked near a Best Buy. And he says, "You know what? Jump in the car. We'll finish talking in the car. Let's not stand out here because the feds are going to be taking pictures of us if they see us." Because we were both from two different families. So we jump inside his Mercedes. Windows are tinted. So we're sitting there talking, and we just had lunch. So we're having a nice conversation. And this white Lexus pulls up, and out jumps a woman, dressed to the nine, looking like somebody out of Mob Wives, right? The series. And she jumps out, and he gets this look on his face, like, "Oh my God." He leans back. She runs around, starts smashing her rings into the window, and tries ripping the door open. Open the door, and she's cursing at him. Open the door. She thinks he's in the car with another woman, can't see him because the tint is, the tint is so dark. And she goes absolutely ballistic. And she's screaming in this parking lot and thinking I caught him. I finally caught him cheating on me. And he opens the door and she lunges over to attack me. She's so seeing red so much she doesn't even know it's a male. And he starts screaming, "Whoa, whoa, what are you doing? It's Giovanni. Giovanni's in the car with me." And she settles down. She goes, "Oh, I thought you were cheating on me with another woman. I thought you had her in the car again." I guess they had a history of it. My point is, you never knew what was going to happen in any given day, in any given moment. I'm worried about guys whacking me out. I'm worried about this guy whacking me out. Never in a million years did I think this girl would come over and start banging on the window, causing a scene. God forbid the cops show up. Now they see the two of us together. It sounds like a silly story, but in my world, when you're infiltrating, you don't want to be involved with stuff like that. So you never know what you're going to find. So the women, some of them knew, some of them didn't.
And did you ever, in all your undercover, have to have like another female agent act undercover, like girlfriend, sister of yours, or whatever?
Yeah, I did. Multiple times I did. I did, and again, it's a lot to carry, right? You're infiltrating, and you're the art of deception is yours. It's a trade craft, and it's not acting, right? But it's very similar for people to understand. You were right when you said that it is a certain amount of acting, but it's the art of deception. You are really deceiving people, and so it's hard enough to do it on your own. Now, if you and I are undercover together and we go to a party and they separate the two of us and you forget what our legend is, how we met, where we met, and you start telling a different story and I start telling it, it can get really ugly really fast. So, or maybe they break you and I didn't know it. Now all of a sudden you're overcoming your emotions or maybe mine. It's very violent. It's a violent environment. So for me, I never wanted to put a female in that position. I worked with some really great undercover females, my wife being one, right? She did it also. And she was great at it. I met a lot of women that were killer at it. But it's hard enough. So what I did in this particular case, my last case, I decided I did have a girlfriend. Nobody ever met her. Now that's when you know you're good at your trade craft. When you can go 3 years and the targets, the people I was dealing with actually had conversations with my girlfriend. Nikki was her name. And they would have full-on conversations through me. Never once get on a phone with her. They knew she existed. She was on my screensaver. Like when my phone rang or alert came over a text, you would see the two of us on my phone, but they never introduced. She was never brought into the case. So, but
Wow.
yet they had conversations. They would send us Christmas cards to Giovanni and Nikki, Merry Christmas, Happy Thanksgiving, blah, 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 and just send us all this stuff and send us gifts. And yeah, crazy.
And
But
then was there ever a moment where they're like, where one of them is like, I think you're an informant, and they didn't kill you, but they were like letting you know, like they're on to you, and you better like get the fuck away.
no, they weren't on to me. They suspected something was up. So when I started this Di Cavalcante case, the mafia case, they knew that they were being looked at. They knew there was a law enforcement leak, and we knew early into the case because one of the bad guys told me. I already made my relationship with him. I was going to the social club. I was dropping stuff off. I had a lot of knockoff stuff that was counterfeit, like Gucci, Prada, Louis Vuitton. I had all this good stuff that I was selling in the street, and he was buying from me. And then I was buying drugs in return. And then one day he said to me in his social club, the bulls are looking at us, the police, the cops are looking at us. And it's kind of weird, because we got information from the police. There's a law enforcement leak. They're looking at us, and we don't know who's looking at us, whether it's the state, local, or feds, but we're being looked at. And I'm just saying, you're new. So I was like, what are you trying to say? He goes, well, I'm just saying you're new. And then again, that's a moment when you got to step up because they're testing your wherewithal. So I challenged him and I said, is this something you want to ask me? He said, no, I'm just saying. Are you suspecting me to be something I'm not? And you never want to use the word rat or informant. You never want to be the one to introduce into the conversation. But I said, is there something you want to ask me? Because I would ask me right now because I'm getting a little fed up with you. I'm not threatening you. I'm just letting you know it's bothering me. So real quick, he was like, no, Giovanni, I'm just saying. You're new around here. You just got around. You just started coming around. Now we're being looked at. About 2 years later, the same guy he he tried to claim me. He tried to claim me for his crew. He was a May guy, and I didn't go on his crew. I didn't go with him, and he was really, really upset by it. He really wanted me to be with his crew, and I turned it down, and I was with my captain, and he got really mad. So he challenged me one day and threatened to chop me up into pieces. So that was a tough day. So that was a very that was a draining day.
And how did you get
So
out of not being chopped up?
so I knew to show certain things. I said I got to read the book. So
And so, okay, well, I want you to sell your book. So, and I'm going to read it. But okay, so how much can you tell me without giving it
yeah, I
away?
can tell you. I
Okay,
can tell
yeah.
you. So he challenged me one day. There's some things that happened before that. There was a mishap, and a text was sent to him in the middle of a meeting, and it was sent by another associate of mine. So there was all these different dynamics going on in the family. The family was at war internally. I was on one faction, he was with another faction. So there was this bad relationship now. A good relationship went really horribly wrong. So and eventually he was the guy that I was supposed to kill. So he had said to me at a meeting, he tried calling me to a meeting, and when I got there, he was really, really upset. Now he's a made guy. He had been formally made as a member of the crime family, which now that changes the rules. I can't even touch him. I can't even poke him in the chest. I can't even grab him by the shirt because if I did and I put my hands on him as a made guy, that's a call for death. My own boss couldn't even save my life. If he said I want Giovanni dead, the administration can rule against me and they would have to kill me.
So
So,
it's
and
like
my
because someone goes to the next
disrespect.
level. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. It's like a promotion, right?
Wow.
When you're a made guy, it's one thing, right? You're an associate, which we were, and then he became a made guy. And then there's another level of being a captain. It's very much like military and law
Yeah.
enforcement. So he made the level of a made guy, soldier, and then my boss was a captain. So he had rank over him. And then the administration was the boss and the underboss. So yeah, that day he kind of like called me out on it and said, look, again, he made the reference of me. Some things happened. He accused me of being bad, and he said, look, either two things. One, you're a rat. And then that's when I went to lunge at him. And I knew I wasn't going to put my hands on him. I said, what did you say? Oh, he said to me, you're wearing either one, you're wearing a wire, right? You're a rat and you're wearing a wire. And I opened up my jacket and I went to show him. Go ahead, you want to check me? Go ahead. Now he had a gun in his pocket and I knew he was armed and he had it on he had his in his hand the whole time in his pocket. And he took a step back from me and I said, go ahead, check me. And he goes, listen, Giovanni, because he knew I was becoming aggressive towards him again. Or you're being watched and you brought the bulls to us. As if to say, you're being followed by the cops and you brought the heat to us and that's why they're watching us. So I quickly remedied that by, challenging him. Again, understanding human intelligence and emotional communication. I kind of quelled it and put it out, put it to bed and then quickly put it back to business. Saying, hey, look, we always work well together. I don't know what you have. You have this problem with me. I don't know what it is. As if what you would do with one of your girlfriends or a guy would do with his buddy. I don't know what it is between me and you, but let's just put it to bed. Let's get back to making money. That's what we do good together. Let's get back to making money. And the minute you introduce green and money, it puts everything to bed, right? And he goes, yeah, yeah, yeah. It just bothered me. I said, all right, you said your piece. You done with it? Can we go back to making money now? And he said, yeah, yeah, yeah. He says, well, you got any cigarettes? Because I was selling him cases of cigarettes. And I go, yeah, I get cigarettes. He goes, all right, you got the Marlboros or you got Newports? Nah, I don't have any. I got like shit cigarettes. I got like Marlboro Lights. You want them? You can have them. That's all I got. Like I intentionally gave him the bottom of the barrel, the scraps that I had. And he goes, all right, at his same price, which was like 2,700 a case or something. And I go, no, 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 the price went up. And he laughed and he chuckled. And when I said the price went up, that saved my ass because in the street, that's what a real gangster would do. You challenged me, challenge accepted, I taxed you. So when I taxed him extra money, he knew I was a gangster and he just let it go. So you have to think that fast on your feet.
So when it comes to like, okay, now you got the person arrested and it gets revealed that this guy that they're hanging out with for years, what is that like?
That's tough. That's a hard one. That's probably some of the hardest emotional roller coasters I've had in my career, right? Because of what you mentioned earlier, Heather. It wasn't the bad guys. Putting the bad guys in jail was my job. I never put a case on somebody that didn't deserve a case. In my work, I always had great tapes against you, right? You always, nobody was ever set up. Nobody was ever, we didn't lie on a stand. We didn't set you up. We didn't commit, we didn't create evidence against you. It was your own words. Imagine 3 years worth of tapes, your own words. There's no getting out of that. So it was a different level. But for me, 3 years of meeting Heather and meeting all these other people and interacting with the good kids, all their kids. The kids were the hardest part. Uncle Giovanni, Cousine, cousin, hey cousin. And they would really, when they told you they loved you, like an Irish family welcomes you in or an Italian family welcomes you in, they don't, they soak you, they drown you with love, right? Culturally, they do. When you're welcomed into an Irish person or Italian person home, a German person, most cultures are just when you're welcomed into their house, man, you can it's your home, right? That's how they make you feel. And in the end, that's where I felt like I didn't put the grandfathers in jail. I didn't put their fathers in jail. I didn't put their husbands in jail. They did it. I didn't do it. But for me, I've never experienced that where it was like, man, now this 10-year-old boy, his dad's not going to be with him for the next 10 to 20 years. Not because I did something wrong, but just because, you know what? I just feel bad because the kid was a good kid. I made sure he had everything he needed for Thanksgiving. I made sure he had it. Even though the guy was committing crimes with me, I was running a crew at the end, my own crew. I would always make sure my crew was taking care of their kids during Christmas. If they needed something, I gave them, I made sure they had extra money. We got an extra score. I gave them some extra counterfeit goods to sell to make sure they had, make sure the kids get what they want. One of my guys, his kids got hurt by a dog and got mauled by a pit bull and it was in the hospital. I made sure, here's some extra money. Here's some, go take care of them, do this, this, and this. And that's the hard part, right? And again, these people telling you that they love you, I knew they truly meant it. So much so, even the bad guys, when they got arrested. The FBI agents told me later on that went and made the arrests. When we went to get him, the first thing he was doing was telling his girlfriend or telling his wife, go in the other room and get my phone, get my burner phone, get my little flip phone. It says Giovanni on the back. Get it quick and get rid of it. Call Giovanni, tell him to run. Tell Giovanni to run. So they, even when they were getting arrested, they were looking out for me. They didn't know I was the undercover yet. But just to show you the amount of loyalty they had towards me. So those moments I wasn't prepared for mentally. So to unplug from that 3 years and then just to unplug was very, very difficult for me.
So then they would never go to your house, or did you have like a fake house?
So I had fake I had apartments. I had an apartment in New York City. I had an apartment in Vegas. They would come to my house often. So when you walked in my house, you were exposed. Like I write about him, my associate, another undercover Dutch. There were pictures of me and Dutch on my refrigerator. So when I made reference to him, they knew, okay, there's the face to go with the name, and they made reference. He was real. My girl, pictures all of us, all over, all doing things, weddings, christenings, parties, vacations.
So
They
you
do
did like a whole
pictures.
photo shoot before setting up the house
Yeah,
so that
yeah,
you'd
I put
have
a
like a
lot.
history.
Yeah, I put a lot of work. I got 25 years of doing this. I used to carry a Rubbermaid container, a big Rubbermaid container, because depending on who I was and depending on how I wanted to stage my apartment. If I wanted you to think I was a junkie, I had prescription pill box, bottles all over the place with my name on it in case, I'd leave the bathroom and you would all over the coffee table, you would see that, I had an addiction problem or I had a pill problem, So I literally had a Rubbermaid container just, like of props.
So you're like doing this criminal activity and you're making money as the gangster. And so do you put that aside and then you still have your check from the government and then you have to make sure that this doesn't like mix with your real life?
Mhm.
Is that a whole
No,
nother
I
thing
mean
you
my
had to
my
do?
check goes, yeah, my check gets automatic, gets automatic deposited. My family gets it back home.
Right,
I
but I'm
make it
saying
home.
in mixing and selling the fake counterfeit stuff and everything, was it ever like, scary that if maybe you could then be in trouble because you like use some of the gangster weird money
Oh
even
yeah.
by accident?
Oh God, yeah. Oh God, yeah. We are gone through our cases are gone through auditing. We do audits on ourselves within the bureau and the government. And we have auditors, government auditors that while we're undercover are auditing all of our expenses, you know. And if you are off by a nickel, man, they'll take your shield. They will end the case. They will bring you up on charges. So and again, it's not that you're stealing it. Like let's say you do your monthly bills. I pay my bills. I go to the bank, I pay my bills as an undercover. I take care of everything I'm supposed to take care of. If my bottom line is off by a nickel, I'm sweating bullets. I'd rather a guy threaten to chop me up into pieces than have the auditor from the FBI going through my case and then having to, because again, that nickel, I'm not kidding you, 5 cents. If I'm off by 5 cents, somebody's getting a phone call going, hey, such and such a case is off and we have to look at it because they want to make sure, we've had when you have that kind of clearance, top secret clearance, you have to turn your bank records over to the government every 3 years, your personal records, not just because again, I didn't just do, I did spy work. So, you can be accused of treason, you can be flipped by another government, you can be flipped by another agency, all these horrible things can happen. So, yeah,
So
so
in
you're,
going after like a big mafia family
hmm
and exposing it and what the mafia has done, I mean, was there like are they involved in drugs? I know they would go to like the mom and pop shops and be like, you have to pay us this much a week, otherwise we're gonna fuck you over. Like they so they would just so they it was like the town was sort of like under some type of regime that they couldn't get out of. So was that the goal in breaking it up so that this could stop running these towns? Or I guess I
yeah.
never really totally understood like the variation of crimes and that they did even watching The Sopranos, I was always like a little bit confused.
Yeah, where I come from, the mob traditionally ran, again, New Jersey, I'll give you an understanding. The large scale with the docks, the ports, right? The unions, everything that was made in New York City, every skyscraper that was made in New York City was had a labor union associated with it. It's not that the labor union is corrupted. There are people inside that were corrupted back in the day, gangsters that made their way into these unions. My family, the Cavalcante crime family, was famously known. John Riggy was the boss of the family. When John Riggy was in the height of his power, he controlled all the concrete in New York. Imagine all the concrete that was delivered. That power and money, he made millions on that. There's guys that have made money on gas scams and tax scams and counterfeit goods, import export goods. No matter, as long as you could figure out a way to make money, cigarettes. There was big money in cigarettes, counterfeit goods. There was big money in counterfeit goods, knockoff stuff that fall off the back of a truck, sports betting,
So when they say stuff
racketeering.
that falls off of the back of a truck, that means
Mhm.
you then have a trucker that
Sure.
is
Okay.
in the family on a low level or whatever. So they actually have a job as a trucker and then they park and like give you some of it and it just no one ever follows up and realizes it
Yeah,
was
so
given
much
away.
comes into the so much comes into the ports, Heather, like Port Newark and the ports in New Jersey, Miami. So much comes into these ports, and once they hit the country, there's all these goods. I mean, you can't account for them sometimes. So once a couple of boxes go missing, maybe a container gets damaged, the container falls off the truck on the way, falls off the ship on the way over. It's not, all these. You pay somebody off inside that mismanages the numbers and then you have a half a load or a quarter of a load of a truck, and maybe you have a whole truck. It depends on what it is. And then you take that and you bring it to the neighborhoods, and those less fortunate will buy those goods, Timberland boots, Uggs, knockoff Uggs, even if they're legit. If I got a truckload, I hijacked a truckload of Uggs or Timberlands. I'm making good money on that. Man, razor blades, baby formula, all this kind of stuff back in the day, millions of dollars in baby formula, you know?
Oh, that is so sad.
It is sad. It is sad. But that's what these guys do. They scrape the bottom of the barrel. As they say, right? They'll squeeze a quarter till the eagle. They'll squeeze a quarter till the eagle screams. That's how bad they'll squeeze everything out of a quarter they can get, you know? And anything there is to make. And those little I was dealing with the guy, he was making a lot of money doing cocaine, right? Selling cocaine. I was buying cocaine from him. I go to meet him one night to buy cocaine. He's locked in this little garage, and he goes around during the day and has people bring him other VCRs, wires, and what he's doing is he would strip the plastic and get all the copper and all the metals exposed, and he would fill up barrels. And then he wound up selling those and shipping them to China when he had 50 gallon drums full of it. He would ship them over to China and they would pay for the scrap, and he was scrapping the metal. He had scrapped so much metal on his side because he hated his wife, right? He truly hated his wife and hated being home with her. He locked and he wasn't unfaithful to her. He just hated her. And he would lock himself in his garage at night after he closed his shop, and he would sit there and just strip wire, bare wire, and throw it into a bucket. He had so much, he put his kids through college. And so he had the wherewithal to do that, but yet he's selling cocaine too. But there's such a hot mess that they can't save the money. As fast as they make the money goes out. But my bosses in the crime family, at my heyday, we had a strip club we were opening in Vegas. We were bottling water we bought a glacier. We were doing our own bottled water, right? Legitimate business.
So it was
We
that's
had
legitimate. Yeah.
legitimate business. Yeah, we hide the illegal money with the legal money, right? We call it the left and the right. The left is the bad, the right is the good. So we had blood diamonds coming in like they did, and they let me into the fold. We had blood diamonds. When they introduced the whole thing that we had a glacier. I was, wait a minute, we actually have a glacier? And they're like, yeah, yeah. And they told us the whole thing, how they're making money on bottling water, like Poland Spring water, similar to Poland Spring. And that's how we were going to do and then we were opening up a strip club in Vegas. And, at the end, we bought the club and we were going to open it up and I was supposed to manage it. And it was crazy.
And then you had enough to get them arrested before all this went
Yeah,
down.
once I went to a meeting, that's kind of what ended the case. So the case ended in 2015. If the case didn't end uh, in 2015, it was March of 2015, November of 2015, I was going to be proposed to be made into the family. I would be the first made undercover ever to be made into the mafia, first law enforcement. But what happened was they decided that they were going to kill one of our own, two of our own, and then eventually took one off the table for political reasons inside the crime family, and they wanted me to kill one guy. So he was a made guy, and then once I was given the task to kill him, we kind of knew the clock was ticking, and there was only months left in the case. So we wrapped up the case, and it was successful, and we made the arrests.
And then what was it like when you had to see them after, like in court and stuff?
So that was the best part for me because in previous cases, I'd have to look them in the face. In this case, 3 years making tapes every single day, making videotapes on some of them. And then nobody ever went to trial. These guys, from what, the U.S. attorney had told me, and they snickered about it, at their first appearance when they were arraigned before the judge, a lot of the gangsters just said, listen, Your Honor, just stick me in a can and let me start serving my time. I know it was Giovanni. There's no way I'm going to beat this. So let me at least put me in now and let me start getting credit for my sentence. So they were happily, my capo, my boss, he was recently released. When I met him, he had just been paroled for 14 years for murder. So now he had, went back in for another 10 years. And then he, recently got out. He violated again and went back in. And now he's still an active member of the crime family.
Well,
So it's a
did
vicious
anybody
cycle.
have to go to prison for actual murder, or was it all the other
Yes.
stuff?
No, no, some guys went for cocaine distribution. I was doing cocaine with. Some guys went for conspiracy to commit murder. Other guys went for different things. Yeah, most of them went for drug use and conspiracy to commit murder.
Did you
And
ever have
RICO,
to
racketeering.
fake doing drugs or actually do drugs to play the role?
No, I've been as a young detective, I was put in a position. First time I was ever put in that position was the last time I was put in that position, right? I was young. I was in my 20s, and I did some stupid stuff and locked myself in an apartment. I was an outlaw biker at the time, and I had the whole look and everything going. And some guy challenged me, and he said he wouldn't sell me drugs, So I talked my way out of it. Not really me, to credit to the informant that I was with, who was vouching for me. He kind of saved my ass as a young cop, and he threw me a bone. He was an older guy, and he actually got me out of it. So from that point on, I knew, guys would say to me, "See, I'm not in it to do drugs. I'm not a drug addict. I make money on this stuff." That's how I used to. And guys would say to me, sometimes some of the cases. I had infiltrated the triads. I was helping infiltrate the triads one time, and
Is
a
triads another
killer.
family or?
Triads are a Chinese organized
Oh,
crime.
wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
And they're very vicious. And the one guy had just been released from prison, and when I met him, he didn't like the fact that these Italian guys were at this banquet and this function, and he kind of came over to the table and wanted it to be known. And he says, "Hey, when this party's over, we're all going back to my house, and I got prostitutes and cocaine. We're gonna party all night." So, you kind of, as a gangster, you just step up and, who do you think you're talking to? Like, You don't talk to me like that. And then you got to be careful because you don't want to get your head chopped off either. So you let it be known, as gangsters do. You don't disrespect me like that. You know, I don't do that garbage. I don't do, well, you're gonna tonight. No, no, I won't do business with you. I'll tell you what. You go tell your boss that you think I'm gonna do drugs with you all night, and then I won't do business with you anymore. You go explain to your boss that you're gonna lose millions of dollars. And that kind of puts it to bed right away. So, yeah, I've been in some situations where the I write about in the book where I was buying cocaine from some guys and they started cooking it in the basement. And I had a reaction from it because it's crack. Once you start cooking cocaine, it turns into crack and it's in the air and it's smoke and you're breathing it in. And, that was a terrible thing. So,
You mentioned Married to the Mob. I mean, when those shows came out, I always was like, I can't believe that these people are doing these shows, or even like Real Housewives of New Jersey. A couple of them, they weren't, there's been talk that one of the family was somewhat involved in organized crime. There's been other crimes after um, involving some of the housewives that where her ex-husband actually is in prison for trying to have or having someone actually break into the house and hit them. Dina Manzo. I don't know if you're familiar, but what I mean is that not the dumbest thing on earth to be on a reality show if you are in this crime world?
if I was a real gangster, Heather, I don't think I would let my significant other be on TV and
Yeah,
flaunting it around because, again, I don't want Uncle Sam looking at me for taxes. You know what I mean? And
yeah,
that's the biggest thing when these women, they're wearing fur coats, and yeah, it's reality TV. They're giving a lot of these things. It's really not theirs. And, reality TV and again, coming where I come from, the names that you mentioned are all from my neighborhood.
yeah,
These shows were filmed, and I know people that were extras on these shows, and there's a lot of stuff that's pumped in. A lot of these reality shows are made up scenarios, and they fuel the fire. But yeah, I mean, just to tell you, I infiltrated a mafia case, and some guys from Italy, the motherland as they call it, guys from the another crime family came over to the U.S. and we were doing business with them as made guys. And I had an informant who was a made guy in a crime family. He's a boss of a crime family, and they all came to one of our apartments in New Jersey to have a meeting. So the guys from Italy come over, they fly over. I had the bosses from the New York family. They're sitting in my apartment, and that show that you mentioned happened to be on TV.
Real
And
Housewives,
we didn't set it up that way. Yep.
Real Housewives
So
of New Jersey. You mean
no, it was a
Married to
mob
Mob?
wife. Yeah, a
Oh
mob
yeah,
wife. Mob wife
mob
thing was
wives.
on.
Yeah,
So as we walk in the apartment, okay, it was staged. My girlfriend, my acting girlfriend, she was in there. She had a cameo for 2 minutes. She was a stripper, right? And she was a dancer, and she had to go to work. She was getting ready for work, and we were using her apartment. So imagine this is like a scene out of The Sopranos, right? So we're going to use my apartment, which is my girlfriend's place. That's where we're going to have this meeting. She put out nice bottles of Italian wine for us. She put out a nice charcuterie board, some espresso, some gabagool, some this, that, right? Some cheese. She made it nice. We come to the house. I walk in the apartment. She tells me I'm going to work. I put everything out for you, sweetheart. Okay, sweetie. I'll see you later. Have a good night at work. She goes. We sit down on the couch. She happened to be watching Mob Wives, right? And this wasn't planned. We sit down, and these two mate guys, one from Italy and one from America, they sit on the couch in front, and it's the guy from America. The guy from Italy starts like he's watching the show and he's listening to, and they're dropping F bomb after F bomb and names after names, and he just like he's offended. And the American guy turns around, the American mob boss, he's like, literally doesn't even break. He goes, who talks like this? Listen to the mouths on these girls, like these women. Like, and I didn't want to tell you, he used a derogatory term. And he
yeah,
says, the mouths on these girls. Like, who uses this kind of language? And he looks and it's hysterical to listen to these two mob guys going, does your wife talk like this? And he goes, no, my wife don't talk like this. No, we don't use this language. We don't act like this. And there's these two guys and they're in the life and these people are portraying this thing in this. But America eats it up. They love this stuff. The fashion, the
yeah,
craziness, the wildness. But
yeah.
a
It's
lot of
a
girls I met, they were like that. They were, a lot of girls, a lot of gumads, as they call them, were like that. Girlfriends. Yeah.
yeah. That's amazing. Now wait. So if your informant was pretending to be a stripper, did she actually have to go to the club and strip?
No, no, no. She just went and The FBI guys picked her up a
Oh,
block away
okay.
and she's walking to a car
Because
and
I
they were
always thought like I always thought as like I'm a weird person, but I always thought like, if I was to be a cop, like, it'd be kind of fun to be like the hooker, like
the
wear the
hooker.
slutty outfits and be the
Oh yeah,
hooker
yeah,
and
yeah,
and
yeah. To
try to
do like the
like
reverses. Yeah. To do the reverses.
to catch the Johns to just be like the sexy
You
hooker.
know, so it's funny you say that, right? Because kudos to female undercovers because you're putting yourself out there, right? And my wife being, she never did that, but my wife would have to be introduced to, people that, were dancers for a living or, for drugs and stuff like that, buying dope. But think about that. An undercover cop, female officer putting herself out in the street, and she has backup. Listen, I did those things, the reverse things we call them, and to be that close, but God forbid you didn't get to her in time. And these deviants in the street, and take advantage. And think of all these serial killers that go after prostitutes and stuff. And
Yeah.
you're putting yourself out there. It's a dangerous thing, but see, you're after the adrenaline. See, you think it's attractive because of the adrenaline. That's an addiction. And I talk about that a lot in a lot of my interviews and in the book. It's the addiction to adrenaline, right? It's trying to get over on them and baiting them and getting the bad catching the bad guy. It's that's what it's all about, right?
Well, this has just been so amazing and it's so interesting to talk to you. And tell them again where they can follow you and get your book and listen to your podcast.
Yeah, check me out. It's Inside the Life is the podcast. It's produced by the Mob Museum, insidethelife.org. We're in season 3 now, so please check it out. And great if you want to learn more about everything you and I talked about here, Heather, get some more insight from other law enforcement, from female law enforcement officers who worked great cases, and from guys that came from the life, outlaw biker guys, guys that were in the life as made guys that have been guests on a show. Tremendous. My book can be picked up anywhere, Barnes and Noble, Amazon. It's on Audible. So anywhere you get it, you pick it up. Podcast is followed anywhere you can pick it up. Apple, Spotify.
And the
And
book is
check out
Giovanni's Ring. Giovanni's
Giovanni's
Ring.
Ring, My Life Inside
Yeah.
the Real
Yeah.
Sopranos. And those who are mob enthusiasts, please check out. I just had a Fox Nation show drop. It's called Stories of the American Mafia. It's on Fox Nation. And we just go back and tell the history of mob and how it was created and where we're at today. So.
Yeah, that I would definitely that I'll definitely want to see because it's like now I'm like understanding it so more and it is so fascinating, which is why so much TV and movies have been written about this life. And does the life still exist? Are there still these mob
1000%.
pits?
1000%.
Just like and when you would break a family, would the town benefit by getting rid of them? And then would a new family
Ooh.
somehow get in there or did things not
No,
really change?
no, things don't change.
Oh,
We as law enforcement, we try to do what we can to quell it and control it. Where I come from, there was an even keel. I mean, I'm not saying it's a good thing to have the mafia, but where I come from and the way I grew up in the city I grew up outside of Manhattan in Hudson County, New Jersey, it's the home. It's the epicenter for the mafia, right? It's where the home of Frank Sinatra is where I'm from. And, that whole area was controlled. If the police and the law enforcement couldn't take care of it, the mob guys took care of it. There was this balance. There was always this
oh, I
respect and
see.
balance.
Yeah.
So yeah, so it's but it's there. It never goes away. We fragment it. It's like it crumbles a little bit, but then it rebuilds itself. Recently in the news, I see last week's they had some arrests again, and some of the guys I actually had meetings with, some of the bosses that I took meetings with, had just been arrested again. So they just recycle, and they do their time, they get out. You'll see an uptick in mafia stuff coming soon because all the gangsters from the early 90s and cases that they did their bid for, 15, 20 years, they're all getting out now. So you'll see,
Oh,
sports, with
wow.
all the sports betting you've seen in the news lately, they never goes away. The mafia, don't ever listen to the government when they tell you the mafia is gone, it doesn't exist anymore. The people that tell you that, they're lying to your face.
Wow. This was so fascinating. Thank you so much for coming on Juicy Crimes. I really appreciate it.
Thank you, Heather. Thank you for
This is
having me. I
great.
appreciate you.
Thanks. Take
All right,
care.
thanks. Take care.
Bye.
Bye.